everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chats with Champions, sponsored by Sherman's Bookstore. At this time, I'd like to remind everybody to please silence your various electronic devices. Now, our guest speaker for today is Bill Cullina, who is the CEO and president of the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens in Boothbay Harbor. After several years as the garden's first plant and garden curator, Bill became executive director in 2011. Previously, he had developed the largest native plant nursery in New England during his 13 years as nursery director at the New England Wildflower Society in Massachusetts. A well-known author and recognized authority on North American native plants, Bill is the author of numerous books and articles, including Wildflowers, Native Shrubs, Trees, and Vines, Understanding Orchids, Native Ferns, Mosses, and Grasses, Understanding Perennials, and a People's Garden, a People's Garden that tells the story of the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens. He has lectured all over the country on numerous garden topics, and his first love was orchids, and at one point he had a greenhouse with over 1,000 orchids from all over the world. Among many other radio and television shows, Bill has appeared on the Martha Stewart Show talking about ferns, mosses, and woodland gardening. He can often be heard on NPR with Jennifer Rooks. A summa cum laude graduate of plant sciences from the University of Connecticut, Bill lives with his wife Melissa and their 3 children on Southport Island. And by the way, last spring, the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens received TripAdvisor's highest commendation as the #1 finest public garden in the country. Today, Bill will be talking about the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens themselves and what goes into selecting plants, flowers, trees, etc. And he will share both the joys and the disappointments that are inherent in that job. After his presentation today, you will see some of Bill's books out on the table just outside this room. Please give a warm welcome back to Bill Cullina.
Thank you, everybody. I guess I got to update that bio because in November we moved to Edgecombe, so I'm even closer to Denver now because my older son's at Lincoln Academy and the twins are up in Edgecombe now, so we're kind of shifted a little bit north, closer to here. So, thank you for coming out today. I think the lighting is fine, right? You can see the screen and everything just the way it is. So I'm gonna kind of give, for those of you that aren't as familiar with the Botanical Gardens, kind of a history of how we got started and the sort of the last 15 years or so, quickly in pictorials, talk about what we're doing now, and then some of the horticultural stuff to conclude. And if you have any questions, I can hang around after and answer questions too. Maine, when people come to Maine, they think, of course, of lobsters, they think of moss and boreal forests, moose and mosquitoes, but also Maine is has a great horticultural tradition too. This is the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Garden. Going back to the pioneers and the homesteaders and the rusticators, and today really a great tradition of horticulture that people don't necessarily think of if they're coming to Maine from somewhere else. We also have a long and really revitalized recently tradition of agriculture. This is Four Season Farm, Elliott Coleman's farm up in Cape Rozier. There's a lot happening now with small-scale organic farming, boutique farming, and that sort of thing. A really exciting time for agriculture in Maine too. Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens is a botanical garden. What is a botanical garden? This is the Webster's definition of a botanical garden, and it's the key words in there are grown for display to the public and often for scientific study. So there's this sort of sense of art and science and education all kind of mixed together at a botanical garden. It's different than just a pleasure garden, which is all about sort of display, and it's different than really sort of a research, an arboretum or something like that, where plants are arranged and sort of cataloged, not necessarily for display. So it's I think the best of both worlds, really, where you can mix art and science together in a natural environment. And where did botanical gardens come from? Public gardens really, for some reason, cutting off the, let me go to, it's weird, it's cutting off the screen here. I guess you can see it okay, but I'll change it if it's a problem. This is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, whether they really existed or not, which was sort of a private public garden. But the tradition of truly public gardens came about in the 19th century. This is Kew Gardens. During this age of exploration where, and colonization, where the Europeans were going out all over the world bringing back plants. But also there was this time when people were moving to the cities off of farms and in sort of in the industrial area and losing contact with nature. And so as a sort of public service, the government started building these public parks and gardens as a way to try to improve the health of the populace. So you had this collections of plants and getting out and being healthy. In the United States, obviously, we had a lot more land and space than in England, but people were still moving to the cities. And then they were also building these huge estates to get away from the cities. This is Biltmore Gardens. In the U.S., many of the public gardens are originated as estates, private estates that have gone public. And then there are other botanical gardens that are affiliated with a university or municipality, somewhat like Kew Gardens. This is Sarah P. Duke in North Carolina. Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens started in a much more unusual way. It started in people's living rooms. This is back in the mid-90s. Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens started at a Rotary meeting back in 1990. Two of the Rotarians were talking about what they could do in Boothbay to try to, bring more culture to Boothbay, to economic revitalization, increase tourism, that sort of thing. And one of them had been to the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. Chip Griffin, many of you know, was an attorney in Boothbay Harbor, and he suggested, what about a botanical garden? So this group of volunteers formed, and in 1995 found this piece of land that was slated to be a subdivision and mortgaged their houses, and were able to buy this piece of property for $500,000. And then I think must have had this, a lot of sleepless nights thinking, now what do we do? We've got our houses mortgaged. So, but they just, they persevered on. This is an early picture at the entrance, the future home of Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens. You can see that the mission early on was around education, research, stewardship, and obviously horticulture too, with them working there. And nobody told them, oh, this is crazy having a botanical garden in Maine, isn't it? Aren't there glaciers in Maine? Well, sometimes it feels that way after like last winter. But actually, where we are in coastal Maine is an interesting convergence of climate. There's this is the U.S. DA hardiness zone map, which is something horticulturalists use, which shows the minimum winter temperatures in areas. And I love the colors they picked for this, because green means that is warmer than blues and the purples. So you can see the mid-coast Maine is actually kind of what people call the banana belt of Maine. It's a little milder temperature-wise. Yeah, can't really grow bananas, but it's milder than most of the rest of Maine, except for some like out on Mount Desert Island, a few of the islands. And also in the summertime, we get the influence of the Labrador Current coming down from Atlantic Canada, bringing cool air into the Gulf of Maine. So the summer temperatures, this is a heat zone map produced by the American Hort Society. And this shows basically, again, the purple colors are cooler. So this is talking about like how hot it gets in summer. You can see the coast of Maine here, as we all know, stays cooler than a lot of the rest of the U.S., which is one of the reasons people like to come visit us in the summertime. So you've got a little bit milder winters and a little bit cooler summers, because heat stress is as hard on plants as cold stress. And then you add on to that, typically a fairly even rainfall pattern. This is the rainfall distribution in the United States. And just as a sort of aside, do you know why all of a sudden, have you ever thought about why all of a sudden it gets dry when you get to about Dallas, Texas? Any thoughts? This map is a little deceptive, because what's it not showing here? It's not showing Mexico. And so that's what happens, is the water that's coming off the Gulf of Mexico and providing rainfall here gets cut off by the continent there, and all of a sudden it dries And that's why, if you drive west, all of a sudden you go from forest to grassland very quickly. But you can see in Maine, and if we zoom in there, again, all along the coast, see the blues there, that's called per humid climate. That means we get on average 50 inches of rain a year, like basically low moisture stress typically for plants. So you've got not so bad, cold, not so bad heat, and a lot of moisture. And it makes for a decent gardening climate, in fact, a very good one most years. This is what that property looked like when the organization bought it. This is the Overlook subdivision, so it had a road and it had divided up into these piano key lots. This is an aerial photograph. You can see the road and the lots were all going down here. This is the back river, part of the sheepskit. It was a failed subdivision. They hadn't sold anything, so we just had road and we had power and we had tennis courts. They built tennis courts down over here, thinking that it would attract people to the development. But we now have solar panels on the tennis courts. This is again another picture of the early years. This was really very much a volunteer effort, and still volunteerism is just part of the fabric of the organization. It wasn't until 2001, 2002 that we had our first paid staff. It was really all done by volunteers. And this is no mean feat. That's a 250-pound ball tree. But the magic of the place starts with the site, the ledges, the climate that I talked about, the native plants, the mile of saltwater frontage, which is kind of unique. We're the only botanical garden that I know of that has a mile of saltwater frontage. But things started pretty rudimentarily. This is one of our first membership meetings. In true Maine fashion, have a brush burning party and bring some hot dogs and stuff. And we enlisted local schools. This is Unity College out helping to plant the first. That's the Shoreland Trail where our Ferry House Garden is now. You probably recognize it down there. They were planting sort of the first native plant garden. Very naturalistic. This is what it looks like now. In 2000, the first garden went in, and this was the Giles Rhododendron Garden. This was at the entrance to the property at that time. Now it's not, but this was at the entrance, and this is when it first went in. This is what it looks like now. Sometimes, yes, when they're all. This is what it actually looks like right now because they're all in flower, and then in the summertime, obviously, it goes to shade. So this is really the first garden. And in 1998, the newsletter came out and said, "Big news! We've got in our first parking lot, we have 4 parking spaces." But this is kind of the early kiosk, and I love this because if you look in there, from the beginning, there was a lot of visionaries involved in this project. They were thinking big, and this is a master plan that was done in 1998, 2000, which was sort of the first version of our master plan. The master plan basically is looking at your land, looking at vision of what you want to do, looking at the highest and best use for the property, and coming up with a plan that integrates everything. So when you build, it all fits together, and you don't end up with willy-nilly things here and there. So they had parking, a conservatory, visitor center, education center, gardens, nature trails, all kinds of things in that plan. Then in the early 2000s, there was a lot of this planning going on. This is a proposal that was put out in 2002, and one of the key things was to look at how many people are going to come, and let me go back to go to this one. So they were looking at how many people would come, and figuring 25,000 people, something like that, would be a reasonable attendance based on the Railway Museum and some of the other places around. But they started with this plan, and phase 1 was to put in roads and parking, means of limiting off-hour access by public. That sounds kind of ominous, but it means like a gate, I think they could have just said a gate. Display gardens, visitor center, etc. And that was really the first thing that we started working on. The second phase, we'll talk about it a little bit later. What you can see is roads and parking, education building, conservatory, things like that. So this was 2002, and we hired Herb Shaw, landscape architect, to come up with the plan to create the central gardens basically there, which you see. And that was a project that started really in 2005. And in 2008, when I came, we were in construction. Every year, we were building new things. It was just a period of a lot of construction. I love this picture of our former director, Maureen Heffernan, there with the governor and the first lady. That's Bob Boyd. Some of you know him at Boothbay. There's Bob again. Region Greenhouses, and they're in the construction zone talking about, with nice flowers and white tablecloths, talking about the future. So this is 2004, 2005. The visitor center was built in 2006, and then here's the rose garden under construction. And then in 2007 we opened, this is a picture from 2009. I think here's the visitor center with the kitchen garden. When I came in 2008, this is what I was looking at, just construction fencing and dirt piles, piles of rocks, piles of soil. This is up on our vent lawn, and I immediately went to work planting too. So this is a picture from 1 year later. There it is, when I came, and you can see that's from that same spot 1 year later. How you can, what you can achieve with plants. It's amazing how they grow. So we worked on this event lawn. Here's another angle in planting, and here it is after planting and fading into a year later. One of the things we try to do is, with this adage that I learned when I was studying landscape architecture, is plant thick, thin quick. And it's not always easy to do if you're doing it at home because you got a budget and everything like that. But certainly one of the things that I've learned that when it's a public garden, people are coming and paying admission, they don't want to see mulch. They want to see things growing. And so we really try to work on the soil. I'll talk about that a little bit later, and plant heavily so that things grow in very quickly. In 2009, we started in on the Learner Garden of the Five Senses. This was a picture of the surveyor starting to work. You can see we stockpile a lot of the loam and the rocks and everything. One thing that if you are going to build a house, make sure you work with your contractor to, if you can, stockpile all the material that's on your site, the topsoil, the rocks and everything like that. Because otherwise they'll take it away and sell it, and then you'll have to buy back somebody else's. And a lot of times you get things like Japanese knotweed and things like that in there too. So really we stockpile everything, make room for that so that we can reuse it. This is in April 2009 when the hardscaping was done, and we started. I had picked out all the trees, and we were putting in all the trees, and the perennials were coming, so that when we opened in June 2009, we had it all planted up. It still looked very sort of raw, but you can see it looks like a garden. And then just here's a picture from that March of that year, and then that same spot in July of that year. But been a very popular garden. Accessibility is a huge thing for us, for people of all physical abilities, providing a place where they can get out, and also a place where kids can get out and play. I think, when I think about what the purpose of the botanical garden is in this day and age, where can you go in Maine if you have physical limitations and get out into nature? There's very few places when you think about it. We don't have the public parks that big urban centers have. But here we have places here where if you're in a wheelchair, or you want to use a scooter, or just you don't want to walk too far, you can get out and experience nature. And same for kids. I have 3 kids, and it's getting harder and harder with brown-tail moths and ticks and all kinds of stuff to really get them out into nature. And so to have a place that's kind of a safe, natural environment where they can get off their devices and get out, I think is just really, really important. I feel that the mission of public gardens is only going to become more vital and important as we evolve as a society. In 2010, we started our children's garden, which was our largest project to date. This is the aerial view of the children's garden completed. But this is what it looked like in 2009, just a big cleared area. We started work in 2009 on the infrastructure, and I was able to get in there and start putting in planting designs in May, and we opened in July, so it didn't give much time. But here it was by the end of June. Things had grown in very quickly. Again, planting thickly. And here's another aerial view during the construction. You can see all the bones of the garden coming together. But it was a big project. It was a fun project to be able to work with all this material and to be able to come in and take this kind of bare landscape and with plants just make it beautiful. This is the vegetable garden the first year. And we opened this garden in July of 2010, and the response to this garden was incredible. I mean, the visitation by families and by people in general, it just brought us to a whole nother level of visitation. That early estimate that I showed you of 25,000 people a year, but when this opened, we were up to like 85,000 people a year. So it was almost getting like, too many people for the facilities that we had designed. But it just, that's the best part of my job, I think, is just seeing the joy that we bring to people's lives by, providing this sort of safe place of beauty and nature for them to connect with. And Children's Garden is, even if you don't even like kids, it's just fun to go to the Children's Garden because it's a beautiful place and there's so much happiness. These are my twins. When the Children's Garden opened, they're now 10 and a half, but there they were as little kids. So my kids have grown up with the Botanical Gardens too. We moved here when they were infants. So in 2011, we realized we were running out of space. We had built more parking lots, but we needed to fast track our education building. So we built our Sarge Education Building. Is designed to be a net zero energy building, which means that it through solar panels, it manufactures or captures all the energy that it uses. And it was great. This is another speedy project. This is in early July. The building was opening in July. We went in with lots of little starter plants and plugged them in. But things grew very quickly, and you can see by the next year all that material had grown in. And having this education building has been huge for us. It really put our education program on the map. We had education, as you remember, was important to us from the beginning, but we really had no space for classes. And so now we have thousands of school kids coming. We run over 100 classes. We have certificate programs. We're starting a professional horticulture program for vocational training and also continuing professional education for people in the green industry. So all that was possible because we had that space. And a couple other things, and a few years ago we opened up a dock. That was one of the long-term plans, is connecting with the water, because we've got that. So now we have the electric boat tours and the kayak tours, and this year we're actually going to have a secret garden tour too. Elsie Freeman, who some of you may know, has a beautiful garden in Barters Island, and that's an option. People can take a boat ride out there and walk around your garden. Of course, you may have heard of this Gardens Aglow that we started a couple of years ago. This was an idea to really think beyond the summer season and look to try to build more of a year-round presence, a year-round visitation for the area, because I think one of the struggles that our staff has, and I hear it from everybody around, is there's plenty of work in the summertime. In fact, you can easily have 3 or 4 jobs if you want to, but trying to actually have a dependable year-round career in the Boothbay region is very difficult, and that means it's very difficult to have retirement and save for kids' colleges and get mortgages and everything. So this idea of creating year-round visitation as one way to bring in more people to foster year-round jobs in the area was really the impetus for this, and it really was a wildly successful beyond our wildest dreams. We thought maybe we'd get 5,000 or 10,000 people the first year, and it was like 36,000 people came. So we heard about the TripAdvisor stuff. These are just some of the things people talk about. It's satisfying to see when you build something and then just stand back and hear the reaction. I mean, that's really what we try to do, is we try to listen to our visitors and listen to our guests and listen to everybody that's involved and provide, just constantly try to improve, provide a better and better experience for them. One of the issues we're having is just, we're in some ways victims of our own success. This was the the estimated line from that early master plan. I showed you what we thought we would be with attendance. You can see right away we exceeded that. And then by, by 2016, we're up, 2017, we're up close to 200,000 visitors with a facility designed for 25 to 40,000 visitors. And that's, that's everything from the gardens, the visitor center, the number of bathrooms, the size of our well. We're constantly adding more parking areas, just sort of creating these, just very disjointed additional parking areas. And so in 2011, the board decided it's time to start looking back to that master plan and start thinking about building that phase 2, expanding the facilities. And we could have said, well, why don't we just be happy with the size that we're at? Why do we need to grow anymore? And I think that's a reasonable question. But the reasons that the board discussed were 3 really. One was inclusiveness. The only way that you can really limit visitation is by either closing the door when you're full and saying, come back later. And you can imagine when people drive from all over the country and the world and they come to the gate and it's closed, how impossible that is. Or we could raise ticket prices. Some people do that. Our ticket price, we try to subsidize that and keep it affordable for people, to provide free days for people and that sort of thing. But that's not something we want to do either. This garden came up as something for everybody to enjoy. So just doubling the ticket price or tripling it is not really fair. The second reason is quality of experience. The TripAdvisor ratings that we have, we take a lot of pride in, because that's people coming and saying they have a wonderful experience. But they're not going to keep saying that if this is where they have to go to the bathroom. And in fact, if you were up there the last few years, you might have used one of these. We just didn't have the space for, we didn't have the bathroom space. Our road, this was our road in the spring. We couldn't have any wintertime events or classes because, as I said, in the spring during mud season, we go through what I call the gun it and pray phase, where you're coming up the road, you just put it in 4-wheel drive and hit it and try to make it through the mud. So quality of experience is really important, trying to bring our infrastructure up to a level that people expect and are going to be happy with. And then the other thing, as I talked about either, is realizing the growing economic impact that we're having on the region and what the potential is to basically leverage that growth in the future. I mean, a nonprofit, in a way, if you think about it, there are nonprofits that, when you think of a nonprofit, you might think of the YMCA, or you might think of the Red Cross. They're doing different things. There's hospitals are nonprofits. Botanical Garden is a nonprofit too, and while we're not doing the same kind of work those organizations are, what we do is we get philanthropic support through donations to build our infrastructure. And that allows us to basically subsidize the cost of admission and things like that. And also, there is no profit. All the money that we generate through ticket sales and everything, let me tell you, at the end of the day, there's definitely no profit. That goes right back into salaries, it goes right back in supporting Maine businesses and everything like that. So we really are just a pass-through of money back into the community. We don't send any money to the federal government. We do pay states taxes, payroll taxes. We do support. We're going to be buying $53,000 worth of plants for Boothbay to improve the Route 27 project. We do community projects like that, but we don't, we keep all that money local. So just an example that when I came, this was our staff. And it was run by the board of directors, and we had a lot of committees, and it was a lot of volunteers. I got to update this because we've added more people, but this is kind of where our staff is now. We've gone up to over 54, 55 year-round people and 60 seasonal people. And so 100, 120 people working at the Botanical Gardens. And as we go forward, a lot of those seasonal people will become full-time too. So we're really the largest employer in Boothbay, and maybe on the Boothbay Peninsula. And the majority of our staff live and work in the area too, which is really important. We've got people that, I was just talking to Tori Paxson, who's our kind of Facebook, social media person, and she grew up here, she moved away, she wanted to come back, and she wanted to work, and now she has her dream job working at the Botanical Garden. She just had her first baby. they just bought a house, their husband's doing well. I mean, it's great to see that revitalization, young people coming back and able to do that because she's got health care. She said, I would never be able to have a child without this health care. And so Gardens Aglow was something that allowed us to do that. When the extra revenues from that we put into providing family health care benefits for our employees. So all the money we try to put, that we have, we try to put back. This shows just where people were coming from in 2016 with Gardens Aglow. You can see in December driving from all over the East Coast to come to Boothbay, Maine to look at holiday lights. But it was great to see the community stepping up with the festival of lights and the shops getting involved and everything like that. So economic impact is something that's a little less tangible day to day, but it's real. And this is from the Maine Department of Labor and a study we had done that during the last recession, Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens is one of the few places in the whole mid-coast that was growing and providing positive economic impact. So when we estimate that, we look at what the potential is for economic impact. It's huge. It's people working and getting paid. It's the spending we do on construction, on buying things for the shop, all that stuff. But it's also the money that visitors spend in the stores in Damariscotta, in the inns in Boothbay, wherever it is. And we estimated in 2016, and this estimate is probably pretty low, $40 million in money coming into the Mid-Coast region through visitation. Now we've redone this, and we're up over 50 million a year, and that's huge for this area. So in 2011 we hired, I guess it was 2014 we hired this planning firm, Nelson Birdwaltz, to come up with this phase 2 plan, the plan for the next 25 years. And these are some of the early sketches. And the idea was the central gardens here, which I was showing you, basically expand out from those. And one of the key things was to take the parking, which was here, and relocate it over here, move the visitor center, and then where the old parking was, turn that into gardens. Build a nursery and propagation facility and expand some of the other things that we're doing too. So this is a kind of a bird's eye view. And here's the current visitor center. If you've been there, you're familiar with that. This is where the parking was, here. So what we've done is now we're converting the current parking into gardens and a conservatory, move the visitor center up here, and move the parking up over here. And in doing so, we doubled the size of the parking lot too, so we've got space to grow and space to accommodate people. And this is this is an aerial right now. The construction is just about done on the first part of this 25-year plan, and that was to build the new visitor center and the parking, and we're starting converting the old parking lot back into gardens and everything like that. So you can see the new entrance here, coming over, parking over here, and coming in here. This parking lot is all porous paved parking lot, so there's a lot of sort of stormwater treatment in here. We've just begun the planting, you can see here, of this enormous area that we have to plant. These are all stockpiled trees. We've got thousands of plants that are starting to go into this area. But here's a ground level view of the new visitor center and also administration building. My office has moved to here now, which is freed up our education building for more educational programming. And the former visitor center is now, we have expanded cafe and food options for people in there too. So here's the planting plan of the visitor center and the parking lot. So it's just going to be beautiful. Actually, our largest garden project to date. And when you look at the thousands of bald and burlap trees, that cart that I showed you where they were carrying that one, so I have to do with every single one of those. And our staff is doing that work. So it's an enormous task that's going to take probably a couple of years to finish, but they're working on it. This is a view of the new visitor center lobby with the ticketing and the gift shop. And you can see here, restrooms, no more porta potties, they all went away. And then this is at twilight looking over the bridge, which takes you from the new visitor center across this beautiful wetlands into where the conservatory and the new gardens will go that will link to the existing gardens. So here's the end of the bridge, there's the parking lot. So you can see here how we've converted that parking lot. Now we've put in a pond, This is a butterfly, native butterfly house that we're doing this year. It's sort of a temporary thing. These are all temporary gardens for the next couple of years. Here's some of the stockpile trees. But eventually this will all be planted in all beautiful gardens too. But the butterfly house just opened last week, and let's see if I can get this video to play. Here's just a quick clip of the monarchs in there. So I think this is going to be really popular. We just built a hoop house and put screening over that, and we have butterflies and their food plants in there. They're laying eggs, they're reproducing, and there's interpretation about the importance of native plants and butterflies and everything like that. Just a fun experience. Lots of butterfly gardens around here. You can see this one shaped like a butterfly too. So that's fun, and I'm glad that project, I was out there actually pounding all the posts for the greenhouse myself, so since I've built a lot of greenhouses, I'm happy that is done. Eventually, that area will be replaced with a glass conservatory, and butterflies will be a component of that too. The glass conservatory is a much larger permanent structure, but a place where we can actually have climate-free garden space is really the idea. So people can go in there in the winter, in the spring, on a rainy day, in the fall, and experience gardens and not have to worry so much about the weather. So this is really, the conservatory is a key part of our plan to have year-round visitation here and to be a year-round destination. And roughly that's going to go, this is my very crude Photoshop effort here, but basically it's going in this area here, right about where the butterfly exhibit is. And then the gardens will develop around there. So, one of the things, so questions we get from people is like, well, when's the best time of the year to come? We realize that a lot of people visit us from, whether they're local or they're coming from an hour away or they're coming from a continent away. They don't necessarily, they can't come whenever they want. We need to provide things for them to see, color and flowers and beauty all year long. So we plant the gardens that way, and I try to do this at home too, to really have 4 seasons of interest. Starting our tulips are all gone now. They just had the great tulip rescue yesterday where the volunteers come and dig them all and take all the tulips. We don't keep the tulips, but people take them home. But we're sort of finished with the spring displays. We're moving into summer and kind of the summer displays here in the children's garden. And then, late summer into early fall, the beauty of the grasses and the late flowering plants. We also are bringing a lot of pumpkins and trying to sort of team up with the pumpkin festival. We're actually going to try again to grow giant pumpkins this year near that butterfly house. So we'll see how it goes. It's not easy. I don't know if you've tried growing giant pumpkins. They are not easy to grow. But fall is a beautiful time of year too at the gardens. Someday we'll be open again in the winter. That's the plan, is once the conservatory is open, we'll be back open again year-round for people to cross-country ski and walk around and enjoy the gardens in the winter time. Another thing I wanted to mention is that when I came in 2009, I really made the decision that we would operate the garden organically. And that is, so we don't use any pesticides, herbicides, any kind of, other than what people would list as organic, things like soap and stuff like that occasionally. But we really just decided we didn't want to use any of those chemicals. And the key to this really is to all this organic operations has to do with the quality of the soil. This is when the visitor center was built. It's like a lot of new construction around here. What they did is they used the gardens as a place to stockpile materials. Everything was moved around with heavy equipment. The soil is very compacted. And then what was put back in to grow the plants was basically a very depauperate soil that was stockpiled and stripped away. There wasn't soil is a combination of the inorganic stuff, which is basically broken down rock, and the organic things, which is dead organic material. And you really need both to have a healthy living soil. And so the first couple of years, when I came in 2008, this is kind of what the gardens looked like. It was not what I would consider abundant life. Things didn't look that great. So I started a organic soil building program, composting program, where we started using a compost-based mulch produced at Casella Organics. This is, you can buy a lot of the, what Eric Wood down the street calls premium mulch. It's what we use. And so it's a blend of compost and composted softwood bark. And we spread this on the beds in the spring. You can see it's got a fair amount of nitrogen and other nutrients in there, but it's very slow release, bound up in that organic material. And this is them spreading it on the gardens. And the effect that it had on the plants was just incredibly dramatic. This is that same picture. And then, get up to the transition here. Just the year after we started using the compost mulch, everything just got a lot bigger. And so that's really we don't use any chemical fertilizer or anything like that. We just use that mulch in the spring, and the plants are healthy. They can fight off disease. And if we have plants that just don't do well, like we've eliminated a lot of roses, because frankly roses are just kind of a pain in the tuchus, a lot of things eat them, they don't grow well, and so we're always trying to rotate new things in that do well, rather than try to just keep, plants that are unhealthy on life support with chemicals. We have a lot of ornamental plants here, but we also celebrate the native species too. We've got some beautiful, like the Clintonia, the blue bead lilies. One of the things that we plan on doing in this new plan is to make more accessible trails into our native plant communities that we have on the site. And to basically lightly edit those plant communities in the sense that we might, remove some tree branches, remove a tree here and there, add a few indigenous species that would be there, or that we just have a few of, but not do soil disturbance, not do irrigation, fertilizer, that kind of thing, just to show what you can do even without gardening here, without gardening, just sort of a soft hand on the native landscape. So we've got boardwalk through the wetlands, we've got boreal forest, we've got blueberry, lady slipper outcrops, we've got hardwood forest, we've got all these natural areas that will make a little more accessible for people as far as the a little wider walking trails and that sort of thing. But I'm looking forward to that coming up online in a few years too, to people enjoy all these species we have growing wild. You can see we use a lot of ferns here. I try to incorporate the native ferns in just about every garden I do, because they're so part of the fabric of Maine. I think, when you drive around, you see grasses and things, but you see understory is ferns. And that helps ground the gardens in, in the place that we are. We also try to use a lot of native stone and evergreen conifers and native trees to really ground the gardens in where we are. We're not trying to be Versailles or an English garden or Longwood gardens. We're really trying to have a Maine identity, but ramp it up a little bit with some other species too. One of the things we do is as a sort of a garden design style is we tend to plant either mass plants together, like here you can see there's masses of stilbees and sages and things like that, or this sort of mass blending of plants, where here you've got grasses and meadow roots and hydrangeas, so they're in, it looks a little bit more informal and cottagey, but still you have those masses of plants. And for the scale that we're doing, it really helps, I think, to visually tie the plantings together, so people can, it doesn't feel chaotic. Sometimes I go to gardens and it's just it's kind of like not having a plan, where things are just everywhere and it doesn't feel very chaotic, and subconsciously people read that and it creates stress, believe it or not. So having more of a simplistic kind of design, these mass plantings, it just, it makes it it makes it more calming. And most people walking through, I don't think even realize it, but here you've got the masses of phlox, and later in the summer you just got green. But we do a lot of this, and we have the space to, but even in my home garden, I try to avoid just having one of something, to just plant 3 or 5 or or 10 of a plant, so that it just doesn't look sort of jumbled in like a, like the Monsuite flea market kind of thing. We are trying some unusual things, pushing the envelope of like the rare and unusual plants. I just had these blue poppies blooming in I was looking out my window this morning in my own garden, one of these sort of holy grails, the horticulture from the Himalayas. We do try to, push the envelope with unusual things too. This is a Solomon seal. We're building a collection of those. We're building a collection of the mediums. We just hired a fellow named Andy Brand, who I've known for a long time. He's a great plantsman, and he's hired to really build our collection of plants and become a real teaching and research resource for the professionals about what you can grow in Maine and what the potential is too. Because I feel like, it's like if you're an artist, if you just go with kind of the standard lilacs and PGM rhododendrons and things like that, it's like you're drawing with 5 different colored crayons. Whereas if you're designing, you have options that, think about what you can do with 100 different colors, So that's what we're trying to do here too, to just showcase what's possible. Intersectional peonies. This is a really strange plant in the mint family. But it's all about really, bringing joy to people. And that, joy and connection with nature, I think that's really what we're all about. Whether it's the wild nature, or the walks in the woods, or the sort of, more cultivated nature of the children's garden. But whether you're a little kid or an older kid, I really believe, and you see it, we see people walking in with a frown and leaving with a smile when they come to the botanical gardens. This is the little funny things. This was one of the vertical walls in the Lerner Garden of the 5 Senses, and he planted it this way. I said, "Isn't that like a guy bending over in blue jeans?" So sometimes this is the Ohm stone that we have in the Lerner Garden. Everybody loves that. Just great to see families and multi-generational, whether it's Gardens Aglow or coming during. This is one of the free days we have when we give away pumpkins in the fall. The maze lawn, the children's garden, the caterpillar lab that we're going to have this summer, and just the butterfly house, so people can get close up with insects and understand the interaction with plants. Volunteers. There's some of our volunteers working. There's plenty of volunteer efforts, as some of our volunteers that are here know, working in the gardens, working giving tours, working in educational programs. We also, try to involve school-age children. We are, the vocational training that I'm talking about now is really geared to trying to get more kids who maybe not be on a college track into the green trade, so they can come out with a skill that then they can take and build into a great career. Similar to if you want to become a apprentice plumber or electrician, there really is no venue to become a horticulturalist. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in horticulture, and this is not trying to single anybody out, but that just really have no training, no experience, and it just brings down the whole profession. So really trying to provide that for people is something that I'm very passionate about. So there you go, from the beginnings to where we are now to the future. There's lots happening in Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Any questions I can answer? Yeah.
That peony you showed about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. What is that peony?
Yeah.
That is called Cora Louise, and what it is there's the tree peony. You've probably heard of tree peonies.
Is that an Ito?
That's an Ito, yeah. So that's my favorite Ito peony. It's a hybrid between the herbaceous peonies and the tree peony.
And where can you buy this?
I would say that like Longfellow's or Skillins or one of the larger garden centers. I don't know what's the place down in Bristol. Forgetting the name. Plants Unlimited. Is that they might have it too, but it's they put those in the tissue culture now, so they're a little expensive.
Yeah, I know they are.
But they're great. The Ito peonies, these hybrids, they have the foliage of the tree peonies, and they don't flop over, but they bloom really prolifically, and they're a lot less fussy than tree peonies. they're just coming into flower now, and usually mid-June is when those intersectional blooms begin. Any other questions? Yeah.
I live south facing the river, and I get a lot of wind, and I can't get anything past here that will stay there. It always blows over. And I can't get anything else to grow. I mean, shrubs, nothing, just, they don't survive with the wind. Is there anything I can do to secure plants over the winter so that they aren't necessarily blowing over?
So that they're uprooting, is that the term?
They're just like this by the time I come back in the spring.
Yeah, that's a tough spot where you're kind of up on a hill and you get upsloping winds. Do you have, it's probably not a lot of soil there either, is there?
Not a lot of soil.
Yeah, and that's really half the battle, is that you just don't, if you don't have a lot of soil, they can't get their roots down either. And so it's really people that are in that situation either have to build some sort of like windscreen fence, bring in soil, or try to get some of the really tough shrubs going, like the bayberry or things like that can really get rooted into the. If you look, just go and look at what's growing wild in those kind of situations. There are not a lot of trees, but certainly some of the tough shrubs like bayberry and Virginia rose, and they should be able to get rooted in. Yeah.
So what are your plans with your propagation facility that you're building over there?
The plan, and that is, that's one of the next projects we want to get started on. We'll phase that in over the next 10 years, something like that. And that's the nice thing, you can add more greenhouses and everything. But basically, just to sort of, I'll go back, hang on a second here, and show you, just so people see where that is. So the propagation facility is up here at the end of the parking lots, and you can kind of see here they're starting to work up there. They've got it kind of cleared off, but the idea with that is that we'll be propagating plants for the garden, but also working on developing native selections that are adaptable to northern climates, and going out and looking at wild populations that have horticultural potential and introducing those kind of things. My hope is that this year we're kind of taking a year off from building anything because we're just kind of exhausted by building all the stuff that we did. So potentially next year or the year after, starting work on that, on the propagation facility. Yeah.
What is the goal date for the opening of the conservatory?
Well,
Do you have a date?
there's a couple things. We have to, we're working with the town on kind of the permitting for that because, we'll have to get that permitted. We have to, we've got to raise some money for it too, so we're working on that too. We're currently in a challenge to raise money for the conservatory. And then the problem with the conservatory is you can't just start building it at any time. You have to start in February in order to get it so you can get the caulking on the glazing done while it's still warm before you get into winter. So I think the earliest we could get started with the conservatory would be February of 2020. It might be February of 2021. So, it's a few years out. What we're hoping is at the latest, by the Gardens Aglow 2021 to have that up and ready. Yeah.
You were talking about visiting Elsie's garden. How is that going to work?
Elsie Freeman has this incredible waterfront garden on Barberville Road, but it's her own private garden. It's not ADA accessible. It's narrow paths and a little landing and everything like that. But how it's going to work is 2 days a week, Thursdays and Saturdays in the afternoon. There's going to be a special boat tour where people will buy a ticket for the boat tour. Instead of taking the usual tour around looking at the seals and the ospreys and everything, they'll go to her dock, get off at her dock, and then tour around with the docent, and then come back. But it's definitely, it's definitely not for people, if you have trouble with balance and walking, stuff like that, we don't recommend it because it's not really designed the way the others are.
Hi. A couple of years ago, there was quite a bit of controversy and concern about the rapid growth of the gardens and the parking issues and water runoff issues. And I just wonder, has that been resolved to the community's satisfaction? Are there more parking area per se, or is there other ways to resolve the vast flow of people that are trying to get in there?
I mean, the plan that we have developed, as I was explaining, we're not trying to necessarily bring a lot more people in during the summertime when it's crowded, but to actually spread visitation out over the year. And so it's certainly so crowded as it is in the area in July and August, not just in Boothbay, but getting through Wiscasset and everything like that. So I don't think there's necessarily that much more that people can absorb. We are trying to work more with like the tour bus companies to bring people. I think there's a lot of potential there because that's less impact when a lot of people come on a bus. We have built the parking lots that I'm showing you. Like I said, it basically was double the size of the parking lot we had. The old parking lot was here and here. And so we had 340 spaces, and now we have 688 spaces. And that's basically the parking. We don't have any plans to build any more parking. There was some concern about, it's obviously this is a pretty big area, parking area. We haven't planted all in between here. We're putting in all native forest trees in all these areas here. So as you can, from this plan, you can see about half of that area gets replanted. We haven't done that yet. But the concerns about the watershed and runoff in the watershed were just completely unfounded. We're actually causing less water pollution now with the facilities that we built than we had before. And that's simply because gravel roads with no stormwater, engineering are really bad for runoff. And the gravel roads that we had, and just like all the camp roads and all the lakefront houses and everything, all that gravel carries sediments and that gets into water. And so what we did is replaced all that with this, with asphalt, which seems like, well, asphalt can't be better than gravel, but it's actually much better because you don't get that runoff. And these are all porous paved parking lots. So what happens is the water goes underneath here and goes into the sand bed and is treated like a septic system. And what comes out is cleaner. Actually, we've tested in the rainwater that falls out. The parking lots that are in the drinking water watershed are just these three right here. The rainwater that's falling on here has more phosphorus in it than the water that's coming out of the treated parking lots. And by this. They measure by milligrams to the liter basically, and so like the rainwater had 3, and then what's coming out of the parking lots had about 1.5. But what's falling through the trees here, we measured that too, and that was like 5 to 6. So a lot more actually coming through the trees than falling on a parking lot, and then less coming out there. So what we're trying to do is be a model for best practices for stormwater, stormwater control and water quality stuff, because certainly Maine, there's a lot of work to do, I think, to upgrade a lot of the infrastructure, both the roads and the town stuff, the private properties in critical areas around watersheds to prevent pollution. And we're hoping this can be a model for other people that are looking for ways to try to do that. Yeah.
A year or two ago, I think you were talking, maybe not you, but there was some talk about raising bees.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, our chief financial officer is a nationally recognized beekeeper. It's her sort of side, fun thing that she does. She goes around, travels around the country doing master bee classes. So she has, I think, 8 beehives right now that are down at our horticulture building. We keep the hives down there, not in a public space, because we're sensitive to people's allergies and that sort of thing. But the honey that we got from the hives, we gave away to our supporters and members in the wintertime. And we're calling it rare and unusual honey because it's honey from 1,000 different things, you know. So yeah, we are doing that, and she does some beekeeping programs too. If you're interested in beekeeping stuff, look at our through our educational brochures, and she she has all kinds of knowledge about bees that I didn't know. I mean, that's interesting. She just showed me there's the stuff that we sell in the gift shop, which is a pheromone, and you can squirt it on a tree or something like that, and if there's a swarming, you know how the bee colonies divide and swarm, it draws them in and they'll nest where you want them to nest. What little tricks like that? She has she has this heat gun so she can sense the temperature of the hive in the wintertime. You can see the thermal imaging of the heat that they're generating, and it's really interesting stuff. In the back, in the blue, yeah.
I'm curious about whether you can suggest some broadleaf plants to contrast with things like ferns and stuff like that, so you differentiation in the texture.
Mm-hmm. You mean more herbaceous plants?
Yes.
Well, beyond hostas, which are sort of ubiquitous, some of the things that I like to use, plants in the mayapple family. There's a lot of mayapples or podophyllums, they're called, both the native one, which kind of spreads, but there are others, the Asian species that are nice. There's a plant called umbrella leaf, or a couple of kinds called umbrella leaf that have big leaves. The native ginger, Asarum candensi is a nice big leaf. Bloodroot is another native with big leaves. Those are just a few. There's quite a number of them, but those are some of the ones that we use a lot that I think contrast well with the ferns. Sorry, you probably can't write that fast.
Well, I'm working on it.
Okay, in the front, okay.
My question is about access. I did come the other day, there weren't a lot of people there, but I walked from that parking lot, and so I walked down to the rhododendron garden, which I wanted to do, but there are many people who really can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you planning for now, for this year, I don't know, to get these people who are not as lucky as I am
That's a good
around
question.
this garden?
That's a good question.
It's really far, that's far. I mean,
Well,
it's far away in the old days.
so here's the accessible parking here.
Yeah.
And so then they just come up here. This is actually shorter than.
I was in A, I mean, I was maybe, I was right over there.
Yeah.
I wasn't very far.
Yeah, so this is the accessible parking. This is actually closer than our handicap parking used to be to the old visitor center. I think right now without this planted, it might seem a little farther because if you're looking at plants, you're not noticing the distance walking. And so once we get the gardens in here, they're getting the irrigation set up in here. So once we get that planted, that'll seem even less. This is also on the same grade. So this elevation is the same as this elevation. So there's no slope, and it's paved. This here is the shuttle road. So the shuttle road will eventually go from the propagation facility. It goes under the bridge, and then it goes down, and it goes down up to the rhododendron garden and the shore. And so you can go down this path here and get on the shuttle right here, and that'll take you wherever you want to go. Or there's a shuttle stop over here if you want to go to the butterfly house. So we have that regular shuttle running. Also in the back, under the overhang here, for a very nominal fee, we have the little electric scooters that people can rent. We actually cut that price in half, even more than it was. I think it's only like $5 for the day to rent one of those. It just sort of pays for the maintenance of them. And so those are really popular for people to be able to go on their own. We also have regular accessible cart tours that take you on. You can't get everywhere in the gardens, but it's a guided docent-led tour on a cart, and those come up here and park right in the back, so people can go there. So a lot of how it works is if you're coming with somebody that has physical limitations, the easiest thing to do would be to drop them off right here. This is the drop-off area. They can go in. They can get a scooter, or get on the cart, or pick up one of the accessible cart. And it's actually the same, pretty much the same grade, going from here to here, to Coastal News Visitor Center, I think there's only a couple of feet elevation change. Okay, I guess the last question in the back.
Is there anything I can do to dissuade deer from eating my plants and my little trees?
It's hard talking with them because I try talking when they run away. Well, we actually have, we fence the garden areas. That's really the only way to, to completely keep them out. There's a deer fence that runs around here and encloses just the garden parts of the property.
Are you gonna keep the brown tail moths?
We're just hoping that, we're hoping for wet springs, because that's what really gets the brown-tailed moth. The same thing that kills the gypsy moths kills so this kind of weather's great, we need a few rainy days like this. We don't have a lot of brown-tailed moths, knock on wood right now, but what I do at home for deer, the repellents work okay. The various deer repellents, but you have to keep reapplying them, but I use them in the spring when everything is really tender. And for my vegetable garden, what I'm trying, and other people say this works great, you could do this in ornamental gardens too, is just get 30-pound test fishing line. 30-pound is really the weight that works the best. And string that around the area you're trying to keep the deer out, about every 18 inches up to about 4 feet or so. And they can't see it, and they hit it, and they think it's like a big spider web or something, and they don't go in. So we're using that. This winter, unfortunately, we had the deer fence was down over here while they were working. We had some in, and we were using that to try to keep them out of places, and it seems to work pretty well.
You have a gold standard on the Packwood River with Lake Smart. Are you doing anything locally with clean water and what your parking lot is doing to display it as Maine Lake Society does?
I'm speaking at the Maine, is it the Maine Lake Owners Association this summer? At the conference up in Belgrade or up in Augusta, I think it is, talking about what we're doing. Just trying to get the word out to people. I think it's tough with our local lake owners because everybody's a little bit afraid that, they don't want, no one wants to have the finger pointed at them, I think, that, oh my God, like my property is caught. So we have to be kind of delicate how you approach things and not say, well, this is what we're doing, you're not doing anything. And so I think just trying to, show by example, really the main thing is, lawns, roofs, driveways, where you're getting that runoff carrying sediments with phosphorus, and then also nitrogen from improperly designed septic systems. The system that we put in here is actually, this tune out if you really don't care about septic systems, but it's pretty cool actually. When the toilets are flushed here in the conservatory, they go into tanks here, and then it goes into this right here. There are these big submerged, called BioClear tanks. And what it is like a mini wastewater treatment. If you've ever driven by when you see those ponds and they got little sprayers going, you go in there and it's a tank and there's sprayers going and it's composting biological decomposition of the waste. And then after it goes through that treatment, then it gets pumped up here to a leach field that's up here, which is not in the drinking water watershed, but it gets then further treated there. So what's getting pumped up here is at the level that the local sewer district considers clean enough to put into the ocean. But then it has further treatment with a septic system. So this kind of system for lake communities especially, where you've got aging cesspools and that sort of thing in camps, I think has a lot of potential because it can be sized for any volume, and it's, compared with what it would cost to replace 10 septic systems, it's very affordable, and it just does a great job at reducing nitrogen, reducing phosphorus, and pulling that stuff out of the out of the watershed. So,
Will you do Lake Smart or carrot, not our stick, at gardens in the education part? Because I don't think it's real active in the Boothbay area either. It's
I
very
think,
active.
come and talk to me afterward, and we'll see if it's something that we can, yeah. All right, well, I thank you for your kind attention, and